lesson in the series, I'm just going to show you how you can print a hello world type of response. And of course, this is in the mockable.io website. And you can see that as soon as I log in with my Google account, I see this two mocks running, kind of like a interface which is the dashboard of this mockable site. So I click on this and I see that I have these two endpoints which I've already created, and let's go into this endpoint called /test. And I've also written a detailed tutorial on how to do this, and I can leave a link to that tutorial next to this lesson. But the basic idea is that you're going to create this new mock, and then you have this test as the endpoint. Make sure that the verb is post, and the rest you can leave as they are. And basically all you're going to type into this response editor is just this angle bracket, the flower bracket, followed by fulfillment text colon whatever you want to type out as the response, and then you close the flower bracket. And one important thing to note here is that this what you use as the field here, it depends on the API version that you're using. So in this case, I am just going for the V2 API, which is sort of the default that you get as you create a new agent. Right now, like it's been the case for the last few months. And once you do that, you have to just enable this request logger. And when you first created, this will be in like the stopped state. So you have to click on this button, and then it becomes green, and it's actually in the started state at that point. So with all this set, we will now have a usable mock API endpoint, which means that if you were to copy this particular URL and paste it into Dialogflow, you will be able to trigger this, that is, you'll be able to call this endpoint, and the endpoint is going to come back with this particular message, and that will actually show inside the Dialogflow simulator. So I'm going to take a minute to log into my Dialogflow console, and then I'll be back to resume this video, and I'll show you what happens when I do that. Alright, so I'm inside my Dialogflow console right now, and as you can see, I'm in the fulfillment tab. I pasted the URL that was provided over here, this https://. Make sure you select the HTTPS version and not the HTTP version, because the Dialogflow will reject this HTTP version of the URL. So once you paste this in, now you can see that in the default welcome intent, what I'm doing is, I want you to ignore this piece here, where I set the output context. Just take a look at the fulfillment section. You can see that I've enabled the webhook call for this intent. And as soon as I trigger the default welcome intent, let's just say I say hi, you can see that it is showing this is a text response, which is basically coming from this UI over here. This is just what we wrote. So instead of this is a text response, if I were to change that to say hello world, then I have to make sure that I save it. And you can see that it's now saved. It's got this message mock successfully saved. Now if I try to do the same thing, I say hello, you can see that it's now changed the response to hello world. Now this is of course a static response, and that's all you can do when you're using the mockable.io service. But what this does is it gives us an insight into what is going on in terms of the request as well as the response which is being generated. So you can take a look at the raw log of the request also, and I'll do that in a later video. But the main point is, with this sort of a setup, instead of having to make sure that you have all the code set up and so on and so forth, you just have a simple way to understand how the request response lifecycle works. That's what they call that, a request response lifecycle. And this is basically Dialogflow mapping an intent and taking the data that it was able to extract effectively, and then sending it over to the webhook URL. And then the webhook URL is going to collect that information which comes in as JSON format and do a bunch of things like the business logic on top of that. And then it will send a response back in the appropriate JSON. So this is the JSON format which is expected for this is the format in which the response should be sent, so that Dialogflow is able to, in its turn, look at the response JSON object, parse the information that is relevant to it, and then it will display an appropriate response either in the console or depending on whatever the channel it is that you've deployed the agent. It's going to show the response over there. And the basic idea here is you now, without having to write the code and set up all this stuff, you have a simple way to just understand that piece, which is the request response piece. And later on, with this kind of knowledge, you will be able to build on top of it in the actual course.